Welcome back, my friends, to the final installation tutorial video for Ultimate Skyrim. This video will cover all of the mod configuration menu settings and other in-game settings that we need to adjust to make sure Ultimate Skyrim works properly. The first thing that you'll see when you start a new game is the character customization window. If you'd like to randomize your race and gender, as I do with the video series, I suggest you use a simple random number generator, which you can find online. Once you are finished creating your character, you will notice that the top left corner of your screen is filled with all different kinds of messages from mods initializing their functions or otherwise configuring themselves to work with the rest of the mods in the configuration. This is, once again, perfectly okay. What you're going to want to do is wait for all of those messages to resolve, and once the top left corner of your screen is clear, we can begin configuring our MCM menus. So this character right here is a new character. I have already pre-configured all of the MCM settings for this character so that we can move through it a little bit more quickly. And with that said, let's open the menu and see what we've got. So the first mod up in the list is Auto Unequip Ammo. This mod has a very finicky MCM menu that oftentimes does not work for me. I'm going to go ahead and check to see how it performs right now. Yes, it is not working as per usual. However, that's not a problem because we don't actually need to adjust anything from that menu. So if yours works, you can go ahead and check out the settings. If not, really not a big deal at all. The second mod in the lineup is Bounty Gold. So you can click this. This allows us to change the payouts for different bounty quests, as you might imagine. These are the settings that I use in-game for the video series that I think are balanced for the rest of the configuration. This you want to leave at 0, most definitely, in keeping with Requiem's unleveled philosophy. You can adjust these to whatever you want, but this is what's balanced for the rest of the configuration. So going out from Bounty Gold, we have College of Winterhold Immersive. The only thing that we need to adjust, you can look through here, the automation options, it's totally fine. Archmage 12th tier, totally fine. We don't need to adjust anything there. This is actually useful for making 12th tier Archmage instead of you, if you'd rather do that. The only thing we need to adjust is here in Tutorial and Ward XP. I adjust the XP per spell from 250 down to 100. This is the experience you gain from quote-unquote attending lessons in the Immersive College of Winterhold. The teachers will put on lessons every so often and cast a bunch of spells, and by standing there in close proximity to them, you can gain experience from these spells. I think 100 is an appropriate XP amount. That should be everything we need for any of these menus, so we are done with that one. Next up is Campfire, which there are some things we should adjust. So Campfire, everyone knows that mod. It's the wonderful mod that allows us to create campfires, if you can believe it. What I adjust is I make it legal to camp in settled areas. I don't see that as much of a problem, and I find it annoying to have to run all the way outside a city if I want to set up camp instead of using an inn. You can leave that enabled if you like. All of these should be left default. Down here in the hotkeys, I don't bother with any hotkeys for anything except for instincts, which I do bind to one of my mouse keys. That will allow you to detect useful items like ingredients and corpses and tinders and things of that nature. Instincts in this second category here, the Hear Creature movement is enabled by default. That is the part of instincts that you might have seen me use in other videos where you can detect enemies through walls if they are moving or if they are close enough when they're not moving at all. A lot of people are very split on this feature. If you want to keep it straight up hardcore, you can go ahead and disable Hear Creature movement. And it's really not that much of a disadvantage because the game is already geared to allow you to detect enemies naturally with the sounds that they make if you're using your actual ears, thanks to Audio Overhaul of Skyrim and Immersive Sounds Compendium. So you can leave that off if you like. This one definitely leave off, but it's off by default. Also, Visual Distortion Effect. I don't like the visual distortion, so I remove it, but you can leave it if you like. Let's go to Advanced. Nothing here that we need to adjust, actually. Everything's fine. Help and Profiles we don't even need to sort through, so we are done with Campfire. Next up is Classic Level Up. There's nothing we need to adjust for this one either. Pending perk point 0, uninstall. That's the mod that prevents you from using perk points immediately when you level up, forces you to rest a night before you can use them. We got Complete Crafting. This one, there's quite a few things that we have to look at and adjust, so we'll go through each one by one. The crafting menu screen, there's nothing we need to change here. Oh, sorry, there is. Non-lore fantasy items. You're going to want to uncheck that. I completely missed this setting when I went through here the first time, but you want to get rid of that one if you're like me and you don't want non-lore items in the game. I am strictly lore friendly. Crafting options, you're going to want to disable inventory conditions on crafting recipes, or at least I like doing that. If you have this checked, it will prevent many recipes from showing up in your inventory unless you have the ingredients that those recipes require. You might prefer it that way, but I kind of like seeing what recipes are available so I can go out and find those ingredients myself. The rest of this stuff you want to keep exactly as written here. Breakdown equipment, this is all default. All of these things should be set this way, and we don't need to do anything over here. Go to Learning and XP. You're going to want to click Use Alternate XP Formula. This is a really fun alternate smithing experience formula that makes it so new items that you craft will give you more experience than items that you've already crafted. Slightly discourages you from constantly crafting the same thing over and over to cheese your smithing level up real high. I really like that. The Enable Learning Recipes feature is really cool as well. It allows you to create unique types of equipment like Ancient Nord and Falmer Heavy and Forsworn gear by breaking them down at smelters. It's kind of a fun little additional feature, but if you'd rather not be able to do that, you can disable it if you like. Mining and materials, this is mostly default. In fact, I think entirely default. It's very important that ingot production is set to 5:1. That is balanced with the rest of Ultimate Skyrim's economy, but these are the default settings, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Misc balance, the silver weapon bonus, you're going to want to make sure that is 50%, which is congruous with Requiem's default settings. I believe by default, silver weapon bonus is set to 30%, so you're going to want to up that by a little bit because it overrides Requiem's silver weapon bonus. And for enable mods, you are going to want to enable Bandoliers, Cloaks of Skyrim, and Winter is Coming. This will also automatically add them to leveled lists, so they will be distributed throughout the world. It's pretty cool. So all of that stuff is nice and good to go. It should look exactly like this. As for mod options, the stuff that you got to change here are the enchantment values for Bandolier. This is how I have mine set. This is the carry weight bonus that I think is balanced for the rest of Ultimate Skyrim's settings. Also, I adjust the distribution chance of Bandolier bags and pouches to 5%. So roughly 1 in every 20 bandits will have some sort of Bandolier item, or 1 in every 20 enemies, humanoid enemies. And that is all we need to do for complete crafting. Next is the College of Winterhold requirements, which I think are perfectly fine at the default settings, which are what you see here, but you can adjust them. These are the minimum skill that you will need in one school of magic to be entered into the college and your minimum amount of magicka. For customizable camera, this is one of my favorite mods. This is how I have my camera adjusted. Instead of walking through each one of these, you can just get a general sense. There's a couple things I'd like to talk about. The field of view, I set to 80. This kind of zooms your camera back, so it's not as sickening when you're moving around at the default field of view of 65, I believe. The zoom speed, zoom increments, and camera changing speed I set to 26 and 20. This makes sure your camera is nice and snappy and doesn't lag when scrolling in or out or adjusting from third to first person. You do not want proper aiming engaged because that is already covered by the ini settings. Swap side key, I can show you what this does right now. It's very nice. It's a simple way to, let's see here, go right there. You swap the sides of your shoulder. Swap shoulders on your character, rather, would be a better way to say that. Pretty useful for combat if you are in third person a lot. I'm really not, but I know a lot of people like to play in third person, so you can mess with that. The other thing you're going to want to adjust is the adaptive sneaking, which makes it so that when you sneak, your camera raises up a little bit to give you a better kind of view of everything that's going on. View mode key, I bind any key that I want to unbind. This is for the rest of this video's sake. Any key that I want to unbind, I set to delete. So if you ever see a key set to delete, that is because I don't want that key accessible. I don't really understand the purpose of view mode. I guess it's kind of like a vanity thing, but I find it useless and I don't want it taking up our very scarce keyboard spots. We go ahead and jump back out. We are done with customizable camera. We jump back out. We are done with customizable camera, and next we have Death Alternative. Now, Death Alternative, as you guys know, is a kind of buffer for permadeath characters. I actually leave it off because I am a permadeath player, as you guys know. You can turn it on, and honestly, all of these settings are, you won't really need to adjust that much if you turn it on. just keep in mind that Death Alternative can be a little bit wonky, and some of its scenarios are a little bit strange, in my opinion. I mostly have it installed so that I can use its death scenarios as alternate starts for characters. But if you'd like to turn it on, just go ahead and click this right here, and you really don't have to adjust any of the rest of these. You should be good to go. Next up is a dynamic vampire appearance. This one's very simple. Just go to General. You're going to want to enable DVA and leave everything default except for combat eyes, which that will, as you can see at the bottom, if enabled, your eyes will turn glowing red when in combat. I turn this off because I don't want any sort of visual indicator that cheats and tells me that I'm in combat before I have realized it for myself. As you guys know, if you watch my videos, this is kind of my through-line philosophy. I do not like having combat spoiled for me, which is why I also have the music off in these settings. Next is dynamic things. Dynamic things are a couple things we need to adjust. This first menu right here, there's really nothing we need to adjust. Landscape overhaul, there is. I disable harvest trees and bushes without collision because I find it kind of an annoying feature. And it's just, I don't know, the way that it works is strange to me. The rest of this should be marked exactly like this. Keep in mind, this mod allows you to chop down trees and do other things. If I disable this option, because that prevents trees and other things from respawning. If you'd like to have trees that you chop down respawn, you can leave that on. It really doesn't matter. I definitely remove the play cutscene sounds when felling a tree. I set the felling tree time elapse to 0 minutes, and I make it a 0% chance that the tree is protected, which has a chance to spawn a spider or a spriggan on you, which I think is not great in the context of Requiem. So I disable those. I also go over here and change the max hits to destroy rocks from 8 to 20 because I don't think it's fun to swing at a rock for 20 times, up to 20 times, but that's fine. You can change it to whatever you like. In the MISC utility section, all of this is fine. You don't need to adjust anything there. In the advanced options, I turn on containers are destructible, and I also, remove the setting for play cutscene mammoth tusks. None of this stuff really matters all that much. You just kind of set it the way that you see here, and you should be just fine. That brings us to EFF, which we really don't have to adjust that much about either. This is fine. Plugins is fine. You want to leave that exactly as is. This area, I adjust the space between followers a little bit so they're not crowding me quite so much, and I also adjust the draw weapon distance, ally hits allowed. These are kind of confusing, but as you can see at the bottom, is the number of hits an ally can take during combat before turning hostile. Number of hits an ally can take outside of combat before turning hostile. I have allies set so that they'll pretty much never turn hostile. Friend hits, these work the same way, but I have that set to 1,000 and 3 respectively. That's totally fine. The other thing that I do is go into panel, and I disable the panel entirely by setting the alpha to 0. This is the little health and magicka and stamina readout that you will have for followers. If you guys prefer those panels, you can keep this alpha set to whatever you want. This is a percentage of how the opacity, how much the window will show up. So 100 alpha is a full opacity window, kind of like this panel window that you see here. And the more you lower that number, the more transparent the window will become until it is 0 when it is completely invisible. Excuse me. That's it for EFF. Next up is enhanced blood. Enhanced blood textures, we really don't need to adjust all that much here. In fact, I believe everything is fine by default, so we are good to go there. ESF companions, there are a couple things that we need to do here. This is the improvement to the Companions Guild, I think is a really, really nice mod. For presets, I usually set this preset to reasonable. That's 24 quests. These are the amount of quests that you'll have to do in order to advance through the Companions. I think this is a reasonable setting as per the name, so I'm going to go ahead and apply that preset. You can adjust these settings individually through here, but there's really not a whole lot. We're going to adjust some main things. Known criminals, so this is something that I go and adjust here. Oh, this looks to have because I applied the preset. Well, we can adjust these on the fly. So largest previous bounty. You can leave that at 5,000. This is the highest bounty that you can have before you will not be able to join the companions. If this is set, you can overcome it with speech. Set that to 60. That's totally fine. I also like making it so that Thieves Guild members can join if they have a speech skill of 60, and Dark Brotherhood members can join as well, but I like to pop this up to 70 because I think that's a little bit more fair. That's totally fine. Vampires max stage that can join stage 1. Advancement, this is all fine. You don't have to adjust that. Quest tweaks. One thing you're going to want to adjust here is gold per guild rank, which is 50, and gold per quest difficulty level, which is 100. So that will pay out reasonable payouts for the difficulty of quests they will send you on. Shield siblings is perfectly fine. Miscellaneous, you can go like this, set it just how I've set it here. I think that might actually all be default anyway, and you are good to go where ESF Companions is concerned. Next up is Expanded Towns and Cities, right here. Settings, there's nothing we need to change there. For patches, you must make sure that the 3D chain mesh from Static Mesh Improvement mod is checked, or else all of your store signs in villages and towns will look very strange. So as long as that is checked, you are good to go with that mod. Next is FNIS PCEA 2, which is our 4's new idols in Skyrim. This mod allows us, well, this is the player exclusive animations. The whole mod name is a mouthful. But basically, this determines what animations your character will use. I prefer using only Bergzor's Immersive Armors pack, so I have this checked, and I click Refresh Animations Now. I'm not going to do it now because I don't need to. But basically, you check whatever animation sets you like here. This is XP32 new animation pack. You got Mystic Female, some sort of two-hander male ones. Check whatever you like. You can experiment with them as much as you want. Just click this when you exit the menu, pop out of the menu, and it will update. So you can experiment with all of your new animations. So I'm going to leave that as is, pop back out. Next is Follower Potions. Follower Potions does not need that much adjustment. I like to make it so that the Restore Health Potions, Restore Stamina Potions, Restore Magicka Potions are all enabled. The update intervals are fine by default. I like to adjust the warning intervals, the little messages that pop up in the corner, to 300 seconds each. And as you can see on the right side, I basically make it so that followers can use any kind of potion that I give them. Because obviously, if I give them a certain type of potion, it's because I want them to use it. And anything in this menu, you can determine when they will use it by adjusting this level marker, use potions when enemy is over 5 levels above your follower, or when is of an enemy type that is listed here. So very powerful enemies. And go ahead and pop out here. Back to Footprints. So up next. The footprint settings, also not anything that we need to adjust, to be honest. This is a good way of tracking how many NPCs in the area are using the footprints script, but really not all that useful or necessary. Next comes Frostfall, which we do need to adjust quite a bit of stuff here. Frostfall, you are going, so normally this is going to be disabled by default. You are going to enable it. A little tooltip will pop up telling you that Frostfall, has been enabled, or it's got like a cute little explanation, and you have to sit and wait for your clothes to be taken off and put back on, and when that happens, you know that Frostfall has successfully installed itself, at which point you can jump back into this menu and set everything the way it needs to be set. So for gameplay, I like to make the exposure rate 0.8, which I find is a little bit more forgiving, especially since I use death as the consequence for max exposure. I also adjust it so that vampires are immortal and immune to frostbite and exposure. I think that's fair because they are vampires. I like to set weather sense to page up so I can check my meters whenever I want to see how my frostfall stats are doing. You can skip right over armor and clothing. This menu is for adding warmth and coverage values to items that don't normally have them. Effects and notifications, this is something I like to adjust. All of this is fine. I like to come over here and leave condition changes. I turn off weather transitions. I adjust weather sense and display to only meters, and I leave both of these guys off. That way I just see the meters when I hit my button whenever I want. Configuring the meters, you can see here, I will show you my settings for the meters. It's contextual, 10 seconds, layout preset. You don't have to worry about that. I will show you here, I'm going to select my exposure meter so that you can see, actually this is not correct. I need to change this color to blue. Let's say even, this This blue will do just fine, I think. We go default, actually. Can I do our default? Is that the one? All right, sure. Whoa, that's not right. Or change this color to whatever you want. We can change it to that. So you can color warm glow. I like to have like a blue and an orange. I think that makes the most sense to me. When you're getting colder, it's blue. When you're getting warmer, it's orange. And you can see the positions that I have set for that meter. I'm going to show you this one as well. Wetness. So you can see the positions and the configurations that I have specified for wetness. And I will also show you temperature. So just pause the video right here if you need to look at these things longer. And I will show you what these meters look like in the actual game, so you can decide if you'd like to use my configuration or your entirely own configuration. I'll show you what that looks like right now. We pop out, and I hit the Weather Sense button. You can see it down in the bottom. So the middle button is the exposure, the top is the general temperature of the area that you were at, and the bottom meter is your wetness level, which as you can see is completely empty because my character is not wet at all. And this will fade away after I stop hitting the button. There it goes. And that's how I like to have it configured. My health is hurt right now because I needed to have it hurt to configure those meters actually, but your character obviously will not be hurt when you are in this scenario. So now that we are done with that, let's move on from Frostfall. Or actually, there's a couple things we need to check in Frostfall that I forgot. So meters, profiles is a cool profile system that will maintain your settings across multiple characters. The last thing I'd like to adjust is in advanced, and I turn off show contextual tutorials because I already know how Frostfall works. If you are new to Frostfall, you might want to leave that on, but if you are a Frostfall veteran, you can go ahead and turn that off and it won't annoy you with little pop-ups. Next up is the Dwemer Goggles and Scouter. Go to General. This is how I like to adjust my key bindings for all of the keybinds that it offers. You don't have to match this, but I think it works pretty well. I also get rid of this one, as you can see. Over here, I like to show activation, deactivation messages. I remove this setting. I also remove this setting, and I tick the Vanilla Night Eye spell because I have made changes to the Vanilla Night Eye spell, and I believe they are more effective than the Vanilla Night Eye, the Night Eye spell that Goggles and Scouter uses by default. All of that should be exactly as you see. The threat assess level thresholds, these are for the Dwemer Scouters, which have a really fun feature that allows you to determine enemy level at a glance. This is the threshold that I like to use, so you can see enemies that are way lower level than you, 7 levels below, will appear one color. Each one of these has its own color, kind of inspired by Borderlands, so to speak, but that's how I have that adjusted. In sound, I leave these pretty much by default. A lot of these sounds are actually super annoying, so I just take off the play detect life audio loop and leave the rest of them on. Auto activate is totally fine. I don't like any sort of auto activation with those Dwemer Goggles and Scouter, so I leave those off. And the oil levels, this interface is actually very cool because it will show you the oil levels that you have in any Goggles and Scouter that you have possession of, and also you can spend a perk point to allow a greater oil capacity, which I think is really cool. So once that's done, we will move on to holidays. Holidays is a little bit tricky. The only thing that we really need to adjust here is the randomization, which is something that I like to do. It looks as though I've already done that, or actually I have not. That's what it is that I've been on this save for too long. So normally there will be an option here to adjust your starting date and randomize it. I like to do that just in fitting with Ultimate Skyrim's kind of roguelike kind of philosophy. So I like to randomize my start date. You guys can go ahead and do that if you like. The rest of that is totally fine. You can also set your own birthday, which is kind of cute. Honed metal, this is a big one. This is something we need to get very right or else everything is junked up. So honed metal is the mod that allows us to use smiths and court wizards and enchanters to, we can use, basically you utilize a variety of services like blacksmithing and enchanting so that you can get your stuff tempered, you can have people craft items for you, you can get your stuff enchanted even if you don't have those skills yourself. So this is how I configure these pips. I take off the NPCs have materials because it just kind of messes up the whole economy and how it calculates the cost of these items. And as you scroll down this way, here are my settings. These are the most important settings in this menu. The crafting cost multiplier, tempering cost multiplier, enchanting, and recharge. If you set these exactly as they are right here, I believe that is a very well balanced configuration. It took me a lot of time to test those numbers, so that's how I set it. Also over here, I have crafting time, enchanting time, and recharging time all set to 0.25, which means they will take about 6 hours each for any of those operations. These you can set to whatever because they won't actually ever come into play because NPCs will not have materials or rare materials. This means that if you want something crafted for you or tempered, you will always have to provide the materials. The reason I have it set this way is, like I said, if you have to draw the materials from the vendor's reserve, it can really affect the overall price in some very strange ways, so I just leave it off entirely. Now we are on to I activate. Right here, you go to options. What I like to do for I activate is leave all of these pipped over here, leave all of them selected. And for the HUD text, I have this set to that empty, that locked, default in red color for owned, which is perfectly fine. I actually think that might make it a lowercase owned, so you can adjust that if you like. And these I leave default. A quick insert here for immersive AFT. Click that, click core settings. You're going to want to adjust things pretty much exactly as you see here. There's not a whole lot of changes that I've made besides the death chance, which I've reduced to 0% just because followers are super wonky and followers end up dead pretty quickly, even if they're set to 10%. You can obviously adjust this as you desire. Really, any of this stuff you can kind of adjust yourself without too much problems, too much trouble. I also add fearless followers, auto relax, avoid traps. I think those are enabled by default. Delayed combat recovery, that I disable. Pretty much everything you see here is what I use for immersive AFT, but you can deviate if you so desire, and that is it for immersive AFT. Moving out of I activate, we have immersive armors. This you're actually not going to click, because if you click it, the game will require immersive armors to rerun its operations again. There's also nothing we need to change in there, so just go ahead and skip right over that one. Next is immersive horses, where there's really not a whole lot we have to adjust, but you can adjust your hotkeys and such. So this is how I have my immersive horses options configured. I make it so that stolen horses are unclaimable, otherwise it's just too easy to get horses, but that's why I make them a lot cheaper than vanilla Requiem as a balance. These activation options over here I have set to ride, show menu, and dismount, so that when you activate your horse, you will ride it. When you activate it on top of the horse, you will get down, and if you activate it while sneaking, you will show the horse menu. Also, these options down here is how I have it configured, and for the hotkeys, you can see I generally use my number pad to manage my horses because there's a lot of different commands, and that seems simplest to me. So you can see exactly how I have it configured here. Feel free to deviate if you'd like. Doesn't really matter. But keep in mind that there are other hotkeys we will be configuring as we go through this menu, so you might accidentally set a key to something we will end up using. But that's fine. It's up to you. Next up is immersive HUD. What I like to do here, in activation, you have iHUD active. iHUD hotkey is X, so that will toggle your inventory elements. We will actually be utilizing this key to toggle additional inventory elements besides what iHUD edits directly, so it's kind of important that you have that set. Key press toggles, I like to have that option on so I don't have to hold it down. For Sky UI active effects, you want to turn off always on and on combat so it doesn't tell you when you are in combat, but you have it on key. So the way that this will be configured by the end of our efforts here, you will be able to hit X to see most every HUD element that normally is not displayed. That includes your compass, it includes loot and degradations, widgets for degradation of armor and weapons, and all kinds of fun stuff. Over here in crosshair activation, I turn off everything except for spells. Wielding ranged weapons, I turn off because of scoped bows. I think it's a much more immersive and fun way to aim your bows and such. And also, even if you don't have scoped bows, it's kind of fun to learn how to become a better marksman just using your arrowheads and natural aiming. However, aiming with crossbows can be a huge pain in the butt, so you might want to leave this enabled if you're planning on using a lot of crossbows for your character. In options, I turn off stealth indicator, I turn off enemy health indicator, and I leave everything pretty much as you see here. And for transparencies, I have everything set to 60% opacity because I think that 100% is just a little bit much. Getting out of immersive HUD, we have I need, which is another big one where we have to make quite a few adjustments. The basics, it should be enabled by default. I leave the hunger rate, thirst rate, fatigue rate all default as well. All of this stuff is should be configured as you see here. I set my drink and refill hotkey to backspace. My eating hotkey, you don't really need eating or sitting, to be honest. We'll go into advanced. This is where I like to set follower needs to default, which makes it so followers actually do need to eat and drink food, and also makes it so that the food and drink that you give them will actually impart their positive effects onto the followers' stats, which I think is pretty cool. Set meals with followers to shared, leave these two disabled. Over here in gameplay, you're going to want to click harmful raw food and cannibalism. Vampires, I make it so that they are hybrid, which means they do not have to eat or drink traditionally, no food or water. They can fulfill their satiation with blood, but they can also fix their fatigue by sleeping. If you set it to pure, you'll have to refill fatigue and hunger and thirst by feeding on people, which I think is a little bit hardcore. Down here in food and drink, I leave these pretty much, these are default. You can turn on the no salt requirement if you want, but it really won't affect anything at this point because I've kind of handled those myself with my own recipe edits so that there is no salt requirement for any sort of basic raw meats. If you go to difficulty, I select valued harvest, food removal both, and food spoilage. This makes it so food can spoil. This removes excess food from the world to make it a little bit harder to get food and stock up. And valued harvest makes it so you cannot just steal farmers' crops, which I always thought was a little bit strange. Over here in gameplay, we have, let's see, combat increases needs. I think that's normally, default 4. I put that down a little bit, so when you are in combat, it will increase your needs by a little, but not by a ton. Everything else I leave exactly as you see here, and I also tick alcohol dehydrates so that alcohol will dehydrate your character. And that's pretty much it. Oh, and also notifications. The notifications, I don't really bother with text notifications. I leave the sound exactly as is. What I really like to change is the widgets, which I make alpha-based instead of color-based to better mesh with all the other interface changes that I make. And I also tick track disease, so that way we have a nice, consistent interface design. Moving on from I need, we have inns and taverns. This is another mod where we really don't need, that's something we got to do. When you select I need settings or you adjust any settings in I need or just go into the MCM menu, it will require you to exit out of the menu and wait a quick second. And now you can jump back into the menu and everything will work hunky-dory. So we'll scroll back down to inns and taverns. See what we got here. Go to configuration. You can leave all these room costs exactly the same. You do need to select enhanced mode in order to use the inns at all. I also like to select follower bed ownership so that if you pay for your followers, they will actually be able to use the beds that you pay for, and everything else should be just fine. Set it as you see here. That brings us to loot and degradation, which is here. We want to go to general. We have all of these, so this takes quite a bit of adjustment as well. I like to set the enchanted equipment chance to 1, so there's a very slim chance that enemies you encounter will be using enchanted equipment, but there is still some chance. You want to select less leveled loot so that the loot that you find is not leveled, in keeping with Requiem's unleveled philosophy. You also want to turn off NPC's loot. If this is enabled, NPCs will go around and loot the enemies that they kill, but it's kind of strange because you'll basically just encounter a bunch of naked NPCs everywhere. It's very odd and just kind of wonky, and I don't like using it. You can also disable tempering service because Hone Metal already handles our tempering services. I like to check equipment repair kits to add repair kits to the inventories of blacksmiths and such. Those are like field repair kits that you can buy that are pretty cool. And as for degradation, this is how I like to have my degradation set so that items do not degrade too fast, but they still degrade at a reasonable rate, and there is a reasonable chance that they will break if they are not kept tempered and maintained. I leave follower degradation off because I think that's a little bit too much micromanagement. And for the item break system, I use classic, where only untempered items can break. And for breakable items, I think it's reasonable to do only weapons. If you so choose, you can set it to all different kinds of items, or you can do armor only. I like weapons only because I don't like losing my armor pieces, and it doesn't really make that much sense to me that armor would just shatter into a billion pieces. But being forced to get new weapons feels like a lot of fun to me. Also, this setting right here, equipment immunity, if you encounter a artifact or relic that you feel should be immune to loot and degradations, degrading weapons and item systems, you can set it to immune using this setting. Most relics and artifacts are already set to immune by default, but just in case, you might want to do that if you have a piece of equipment that you are particularly fond of. In extra, I like to go over to the widgets. Oh, you want to set toggle widgets to X, because that's what's going to make sure that these widgets disable whenever we disable the rest of the interface with iHUD. Over at the widgets, I like to set the style to percentage based, and I set the rest just like this with the alpha at 60. Once again, in line with the rest of our interface. For Moonlight Tales, you will see here, this one has quite a few settings that you can go through. I don't really bother with most of them because most of this does not need adjustment. But general, you can see all this kinds of stuff. Let's see, beast form, cooldown, all this is really fine. I like to add additional knockback protection so that it is configured as you see here. The sounds are fine. You don't need to adjust anything there. Music is fine. Player wear beast. This is something I do like to adjust. I like to make my revert form key end, which makes sense to me, and my power jump key right alt because it is right next to the jump key. That's a really fun ability too, power jump. These should be set as you see here. And let's keep going. Moon phases, this is all fine as well. Feeding skill gain, this is important to adjust. Chance to skill up on feeding, I set to 4%. If you are a werewolf in Moonlight Tales and you feed on enemies, there's a chance that you will gain a skill up in whatever skill category you set here. I think it makes most sense to have combat engaged. But if this value is too high, you will find yourself quickly skilling up way too fast, and it's kind of unbalanced, so I set it to 4%. As for the rest of these, you really don't have to adjust any of them. It's totally fine. See, more interesting loot. This is a fun one to configure. There's really not a lot we need to change. You go to boss chests. You want all of these ticked. More interesting loot is the mod that makes our loot more interesting, if you can believe that. For how much more interesting loot, these settings are all perfectly fine by default, but you are going to want to adjust your horde rarity to 5%. Otherwise, it's just too much. Hordes are when you get really lucky and you get a boss chest with a ton of awesome shit. So you want to make sure that that's not too high for your balance sake. Vendors, I disable Majik and his assistants should not sell more interesting loot. That way it guarantees that only a select few types of NPCs can sell more interesting loot in the game. That includes Khajiit caravans and a select few other NPCs that you can discover in your travels. I will not spoil for you here. Miscellaneous settings, you want to leave all of these exactly default and you are good to go. Next is Not So Fast main quest. You can see here the default settings are also perfectly fine. If you do not like the negotiations scene in the main quest, I won't spoil it too much, but if you know what I'm talking about, you can disable it here. That's perfectly fine. Go back out. We got Pumping Iron. Pumping Iron, there's actually nothing we need to change, so there you go. Random encounters, the DFB random encounters. There's not a whole lot you need to change here either. In fact, the general settings, none of these really need to be adjusted at all. The one thing you're going to want to adjust is the encounter types. What I do is disable encounter types that are region specific. So, for instance, Chorus really shouldn't be able to appear just anywhere. You can leave it enabled if you want. Same thing with dragons, Draugr, Dremora. You can make arguments that a lot of these creatures should not appear just in general encounter zones. Really, this is just my own personal take on DFB's random encounters. If you would like to make this different, you can set it to whatever you want and it will be perfectly fine. Just keep in mind that a lot of these encounters, well, all of the encounters are rectified, which means that they are a lot tougher sometimes than perhaps these, or the designer of DFB random encounters kind of set for. That's also why difficulty doesn't matter, because all of the enemies are, this difficulty will not really adjust the difficulty of the encounters themselves because they are all rectified and therefore de-leveled. There's no more leveled encounters, so just go ahead and adjust those encounter types as you see fit. You don't really need to mess with encounter amounts or encounter difficulty, and you are done with that mod. Next we have Relationship Dialogue Overhaul, which is another mod we do not need to make that many adjustments to. In fact, all of these can be left exactly as is. Follower, idle dialogue, etc., etc. Change specific. So a lot of people don't like the way that Relationship Dialogue Overhaul makes certain NPC follower quips more repetitious. You'll hear them a little bit more often. So if you don't like that, now the thing about Relationship Dialogue Overhaul is it makes a lot of really awesome changes to the way many different people talk to you. So I don't think it's worth disabling outright. But if your followers' little quips are getting annoying to you, you can exclude them from RDO's changes by using this little setting right here. I'm not going to do that, but it's there in case you need it. Next up is real names, which should be configured as you see here. It's pretty much fine out the gate. It'll automatically be in strangers mode because we have people are strangers installed. So everything should be set as is, and you can exit out of that. Next up is real shelter, which I don't believe requires a whole lot of adjustment. All of this can be left like this. I believe sheltered rain volume is default 60. I like to set it to 100 because I like rain sounds. Textures are perfectly fine. Debug you don't need, so you're perfectly fine on that mod. Next up is Requiem, which we cannot actually adjust yet. I will show you guys how to adjust this. This is one of the mods that we have to adjust after we have chosen our starting scenario. So we'll come back to that later. There's also nothing in the Requiem skills menu that we need to adjust. So we can skip right on past that. Simple drop lit torches, the only thing we need to change here. I like to set my main torch hotkey to T, which will pop out a torch if you need it, and you can drop it with Y. Something I like to have nice and easy to access. Simply knock allows us to try and knock for entrance at places that where NPCs have locked the door for the night, for example. I like to set the base success chance to 30%, the welcome duration to 8 hours, and failure timeout to 6 hours. Also, friends always allow entry. That's all we need to adjust there. Sky UI, there's a couple things we need to select here. Go to General, see Medium Quantity menu. This is all fine. You can leave that default. Something we need to do down here is select Enabled for Active Effects HUD. Icon size medium, that's fine. Minimum time left, you're going to want to set to 0 seconds. So what this will do is make it so that our X key, the one that we set through iHUD, will also show our active effects. So if at any point you want to see your compass, if you want to see your active effects, the effects that are currently affecting your character is what that is. If you want to see your loot and degradation stats, you can simply hit X, all that stuff will appear, and if you hit X again, it will disappear. Controls are totally fine. You don't need to adjust anything here. This is the in-game favorites menu controls. It's really fine as is. And advanced, there's really nothing we need to change either. So you can go ahead and leave that as... Oh, actually, there is something we need to change here. Now that I'm glad I'm popped into this menu. You need to deselect the map menu option, because if you use Warburg's paper 3D map or whatever it is, you'll encounter an annoying tooltip that will pop up whenever you go into the map screen. So deselect this if you use Warburg's paper 3D world map. You can leave it enabled if you do not use that mod. Next up is Sleep Tight, which we really don't need to adjust anything at all, I don't think. Oh, you can take off Cheap Shot. It really doesn't matter. Requiem also makes it so that sneak attacks on sleeping enemies are really, really powerful. I like to disable it just because that means it would be doubly powerful, the bonuses, so it's even more overpowered. I disable that. Go out from Sleep Tight. Smart Cast Config and Smart Cast Spells. We can take a look at these. See recent spells menu is empty. Equip spells to your character before entering this menu to fill it up. This is just how Smart Cast functions. If you guys are familiar with Smart Cast, then you will know how to adjust these menus. But there's nothing we need to adjust for the actual settings of the game. This is just how that mod functions. So if you want to use Smart Cast, go ahead and check out the check out the instructions on the Smart Cast Nexus page. Next up is Spell Research, which we will do. We'll click that. There's not a whole lot we need to adjust here either. This kind of just shows you your archetype experience once you've started using the mod and things like that. Spell Research option. Let's see, there's nothing here that we really need to adjust all that much. One thing we do need to do is import our spells. So I actually have not done that yet, so I could show you guys what that looks like. And click Import Spells. You want to import modded spells and ingredients. Hit Accept. And we're going to exit the menu, and I'll show you what that looks like. We're out. A little thing will pop up. There it is, Spell Research, importing vanilla spells. So it'll go ahead and do that. It'll run through all the mods that you have that add additional spells to the game. I'm going to go ahead and let that do its thing, and I will rejoin you when it is finished. Okay, and all of our spells are properly imported, which I believe means that we are done with, with Spell Research and its configuration menu. Let's go ahead and make sure. Go Experience, that's what we just know. We want Options. We selected everything. All right, we are good to go. So Spell Research is properly configured. Next is Take Notes. A really fun mod that gives us an in-game journal. The only thing I really like to adjust here, that's all fine, is the controls, and I select plus for the open journal. By default, I believe it's set to something like X, which obviously we already have for the the interface toggle button, so that's not good. So I go ahead and change it to that plus, and that's the only change that I make. Next up is notice board. There's only a couple settings we need to change. The bounty settings I adjust to match the settings that we selected in bounty gold. So that's 500, 4,000, 1,000, 1750. The rest of these are perfectly fine. By default, you do not want to set any of these multiplier gold per level because that will make the rewards leveled, and that's not what we are going for. Next up is Thieves Guild requirements. This is a really fun mod. Sneak skill requirements. See, you need 25 sneak skill, 25 pockets picked to begin the recruitment quest. Excuse me. I also like to take the number down from 250 to 150 for items stolen because 250 is quite a lot and it feels kind of arbitrary at that point. What you also want to do if you are like me and you want to keep with the roguelike theme, you want to randomize the requirements to begin third quest, randomize the requirements to begin your fourth quest and your city influence quests. More randomization is always fun in my book. Also down here, you want to adjust shadow marks to require the city quest. So you have to complete the city influence quest before shadow marks will start showing up in those cities. I think that's kind of fun. And also this simple setting, use loot mark, adjust the shadow marks for non-member player homes to be loot instead of danger. If you don't know what I'm talking about in terms of these shadow marks, I don't want to spoil it for you. So I'll just go ahead and leave that alone, and we are done with Thieves Guild requirements. Next up is trade and barter, where we only need to make a couple slight adjustments. Barter rates, normally this would not look like this by default. You have to enable the mod, but once you enable the mod, this is what you will see. You're not going to adjust anything there. You are not going to adjust anything in price variables on this side of the thing, but you are going to adjust a couple things over here. The miscellaneous factors is all fine. Location is what we're looking at. So I have my city set the following. You can see Solitude, Windhelm, and Whiterun all have the same 20% higher buying, 10% higher selling because they are kind of just general trade cities. Excuse me. I've been talking for so long. I'm choking on my own spit here. Markarth I have set so that it is the best place to sell things because it's a very rich city and they're willing to pay top dollar. However, they also charge top dollar, so that's the problem with Markarth. And Riften is 25% higher buying and 10% higher selling. So it's a little bit designed to represent the disparity of incomes in Riften. That's why I've designed that way. And finally, we go down to merchants. And I tick merchant gold fluctuates so that all merchants have a little bit different gold amounts whenever you go to visit them. Everything else is perfectly fine. You don't have to adjust anything else beyond what you see here. Now that we are done with that, we can look at trade routes. Trade routes actually does not need any adjustment from us. Everything is totally fine. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and skip over this one because we really shouldn't be messing with any of the settings in any of those little menus. Next is Vampiric Thirst. You go to basic. All of this stuff, I turn off the feeding restrictions. That will stop you from feeding on people if you have a helmet enabled or if you're wearing like a face mask. That seems tedious to me, so I leave it off. The rest of the stuff is totally fine as is. Let's see, advanced. These are fine as is as well. I like to go ahead and change these key bindings to page down to check my blood pool. Unlocking abilities doesn't really need a key because you have a power to do that in your menu, but you can adjust this to something if you like. Basically, this opens up the interface through which you upgrade your vampiric abilities. I leave feed as the default V, and I also adjust the aging stages to be a little bit different so that you have to work a little bit harder before you can become a more advanced vampire. You don't have to change these if you don't like. It's totally up to you. As for the rest of these, they're totally fine. There's nothing else we need to adjust. We do have to go back out, though, to the VT and Requiem patch. We select this and we go to Options. You're going to want to hit Status Enabled. I'll say selected option will take effect once you exit the menu. There you go. Let's see. Oh, so I guess that counts as us enabling it, right? So we're going to exit out. And selected procedure completed. So now that patch has successfully patched Vampiric Thirst for Requiem. We're going to scroll all the way back down. Right there. And then you can see that it is enabled. I also like to check Dawn Guard hostility so that Dawn Guard members and Vigilants of Stendar will be able to recognize you as a vampire. However, you can see here, enabling this can prevent you from starting the Dawn Guard questline as a vampire. There is also already a check for that in the Dawn Guard questline where you can't really advance beyond a certain point, I believe, if you are a vampire. So if you want to be super hardcore, you can select this. If you are trying not to be as hardcore, which is honestly a better option, then don't select this. And also you will see if I try to select it, you can only turn this option on if you're currently a vampire. So if you can, if you become a vampire or if you select the vampire start, you can revisit that option if you so desire. Next is wearable lanterns, which you can see does not take that much configuration as well. I have it set up exactly as you see here. Oil lanterns use oil. Doesn't matter what you select for bug lanterns because I've removed them from the game. Otherwise, they're just an imbalanced oil lantern, which is unfortunate, but it's how it kind of has to be to make things fair. The hotkey, I select it so that my toggle lantern key is L, and I make it so that checking fuel, in fact, we can set this to delete. It really doesn't matter. Oh, fuck it. So it doesn't matter if it's set to escape either. Leave that exactly as is because, it doesn't really matter. What I have it set to do is check fuel on toggle so that you can always check your remaining fuel with a meter by just turning your lantern off or on. I also like to change the check fuel display to meter only. I don't actually know why it's reverted itself to message, but that's fine. The meters, I will show you my settings for the how I lay out my oil meter. It should actually show you where it is if I jump out. In fact, here I can do this. I can go to always on so you can see where this meter is. If you use my settings, it will be in the bottom right above your stamina meter or below your stamina meter. Actually, it does not show it, but it is right in the bottom there next to the I need little widgets. So if you can just imagine where it is, or if you've seen in my video series where I have it there, that's where it will be if you use those settings. Go all the way down, back to wearable lanterns. I believe we are done here. Yes, meters and profiles we don't need to mess with. That just leaves wet and cold and wonders of weather. So let's go to wet and cold. See wet and cold status. This is perfectly fine, I believe. Oh, you're going to want to turn off rain blind. I don't like that effect. I think it's kind of strange the way it implements it. It'll put rain image space distortions in front of your character. It's supposed to only trigger when you look up in the rain, but it's a little wonky for me, and it seems to trigger whenever it feels like it, so I don't really like it for that reason. Everything else should be set as you see here. You're going to want to go for hoods and cloaks. Add these to leveled lists. I have already added them, to the leveled list. This will say no leveled list when you first enter this menu, and you want to click them both so that it looks like this. Go to cold. This is all fine. Go ahead and disable blizzard blind for the same reason as the other one. You can leave off get snowy, for the snowy tick because get snowy already handles that. Strong winds will make you a little bit slower if you're caught in a blizzard. It also affects NPCs, so that's a little bit fun. You can go just leave everything exactly as you see here. You want to leave blizzard blind on for NPCs just because it helps their already kind of shoddy detection. All of these should be enabled and all of them added to leveled lists. I like to set it so that cold gear affects all races instead of just all races except for Nords, which is how it's set by default. And Ashes in survival, this one's actually pretty important. You want to set it exactly as you see here. And for the Ash survival gear options, goggles and face covers can be enabled and added to leveled lists, but you want to disable backpacks and prevent them. Do not add these ones to leveled lists or you'll encounter enemies with them or other people with them, and those backpacks are not balanced for bandolier or the rest of the carry weight items that we already have enabled. Water skins are fine though. And that does it for wet and cold. And got wonders of weather. I'm going to do Wonders of Weather, which I actually don't think requires any sort of adjustment, but just go ahead and make sure it looks exactly like it looks right here, and you are good to go on that one. Now that our MCM settings are mostly configured, we have to select our start, so I will show you how to do that. You want to walk over to the statue of Mara, you talk to her.
Approach, my child, and choose where your new life shall begin.
Fun. So you can go ahead and select one of these starts if you want, or you can do what I do, which is scroll all the way down to the bottom and select Surprise Me. This will randomize your start, and it really fits with the roguelike nature of Ultimate Skyrim, or what we've been going for. But obviously you are free to choose whatever you like. For the sake of this example, I'm going to choose something simple like a patron at a local inn.
Are you a patron of?
and I'm going to go straight to Falkreath would be just fine.
Even the lowest among us can rise to greatness.
You're going to do that. You pop over here, go to your bed, hit bed, and it will allow you to start your new life. Now, you'll notice once you start your life that Requiem will attempt to initialize its core scripts. This is very important. Please be patient until the installation is finished. Let's go ahead and hit OK and wait for a couple seconds. Just like this. It says Requiem has finished its maintenance operations. You can now continue your journey and enjoy the latest Requiem version. So with that, we need to go back into the MCM, right? Go mod configuration, scroll down to Requiem. This is the last MCM that we need to adjust. You'll see here, go to combat. So for combat, what I like to do is adjust this. Really, there's only a couple adjustments that I make. One is that I make it so no non-hostile bull rush / trample. This is something you should check because if you don't, you might accidentally bull rush NPCs and other non-hostile entities, which will cause a lot of problems. It can get you bounties when you accidentally hit people and stuff like that when you're just sprinting through town. It's generally just a good idea to enable that, I think. Also, armor changeable in combat. This is a very controversial setting. Basically, armors are not changeable in combat in Requiem by default, but I leave this. Sometimes I tick it, sometimes I don't. It's really just your own personal preference. Sometimes it can cause problems wherein certain, like for instance, telescopes are classified as armor. Technically, they're classified as shields. By default, I have actually fixed that in my own files, but I'm sure there's other armor things that I perhaps have missed. There's a Requiem keyword you can apply to things to make them ignore this setting, but you know, it's up to you, whatever you want to do. As for the rest of these, it's pretty much fine. Yeah, you can leave all the rest of those. Magic, everything there, you're going to want to leave unchanged. Skills and perks, what I like to do, let's see, is this where we have any changes? Actually, nothing here needs to be changed. Oh yeah, carry weight modifier. This needs to be changed. So you're going to want to adjust this. I think with all of the additional stuff that we add to the game, a additional 15 points of carry weight is a fair, balanced way to kind of accommodate that stuff. You don't have to change that if you don't want, but I think it's a little bit better balanced. And finally, atmosphere. What I like to do is adjust my heartbeat threshold so that it is 30%, so that I will not hear the heartbeat until my health is below 30, just because I find it annoying. I remove the kill move health threshold completely. This ensures that no melee kill moves ever happen. I like to do this because I don't like kill moves because we're playing Permadeath Requiem and I kind of like to be in control of my faculties at all times. However, if you do like kill moves, you can feel free to leave that enabled if you so choose. The other thing you want to adjust is the gold coin weight, which I make nothing because I just don't see the point in having carry weight for gold. It's just tedious micromanagement, and the rest of this stuff is perfectly okay. And that's it. That's it for Requiem, and that means that we are done with our mod configuration menu. I believe the last thing that we need to do as well is to read a book that Helgen Reborn threw into our inventory. That is the Helgen Reborn guide. So you go ahead and read this. It will activate the Helgen Reborn quest. I do not recommend doing this quest until you are at least mid-game. This is the mod that allows you to rebuild Helgen. It's very, very fun, but it can be very tough. This instructional booklet will kind of tell you exactly how it works, and you can sort through that if you want. But as of that, you are completely done. You are ready to play Ultimate Skyrim, and I wish you guys the best of luck on your adventures. Please, if you encounter any bugs or have any comments or questions, you can reach me on my YouTube channel. You can reach me on the Nexus page. Good hunting.